So Cory, I'm going to let you kick it off. Let's just lay the groundwork. Some listeners will have just heard about UST Luna in the last couple of days. So can you tell us what it does and who's involved?
Yeah, so very simply, and you should do your own research and read up on it. There's tons of Twitter threads and articles about it now. But essentially, there was a fairly run-of-the-mill altcoin scheme here. There've been a bunch of attempts to create an algorithmic stablecoin, which means not backed by collateral. Basically, just means that they set it up so that you can trade one asset, and that's the altcoin for the alleged stablecoin that's supposed to maintain its dollar peg, and that they would create arbitrage opportunities. Basically, like you can make money by maintaining the peg. Anyway, I'm going to kind of leave it there. But the point is that this is extremely easy to attack, extremely fragile, and is unlikely to ever succeed, because for something like that to ever succeed, you would basically see an abandonment of all of economic history. They've never succeeded in the long run. And you also need to solve the Oracle problem, which is not something that's been solved in computer science, regardless of what you might see from some altcoin marketers. So basically, I don't really care that much about altcoins, broadly, and don't dig into them much. But when something actually touches the Bitcoin space and Bitcoiners start talking about it, and, influential people with large audiences on shows start talking about something that is false. And I'd say, like, the last time that something kind of deeply offended me in that way was the fake invalid S2F models of Plan B, which were statistically invalid and should have just gone on the trash heap right out of the gate. My main thing is, like, I don't like it when influential Bitcoiners who are like on Team Bitcoin and have a degree of credibility hurt their credibility. And so that's kind of the theme that to me connects those two. Is we had a lot of Bitcoiners pumping Luna, bringing Do Kwon on their show, palling around with like Novogratz and other people that were pumping Luna, on stage and things like that. And it's like, no, this isn't good for Bitcoin. And you should have learned by now that someone with a scam or a scheme, whether it's Stacks or Luna or something completely BS like Plan B, essentially just trying to get clout by pumping some fake models, like, watch out. Don't fall for these things. So that's basically where I am. The whole thing collapsed over the last few days, and it was, there are actually tweet threads explaining exactly how you could collapse it, and one of them was completely right. And it looks like Citadel actually executed the short, and it was straight out of the playbook of how you attack pegs of foreign currencies. Not even that hard to execute. So Luna is down from, I don't know, I think it was 75 billion market cap at its peak. It's 2 billion now, total rug pull. And the value of the UST peg, I think, bottomed out at like 22 cents. Jump Capital and Theros Capital and a few others are going to try to resuscitate it potentially. That's the line that they're saying, but it's really just a confidence game. Literally, that's what a con game is, right? It's a confidence game. And they're hoping that they can resuscitate it enough so that their, free or cheap Luna tokens that they got way back in the past end up being valuable enough that they can dump it on retail and kind of escape with some more ill-gotten gains. But I don't think that it's going to work, is my guess, because you can pull off the attack over and over and over again if it ever gets any market cap.
Can anyone explain the specifics of the mechanics of the attack? I'm curious.
Lyn, I know it, but if you know it, I've been talking too much. You want to just talk through what Citadel did?
You probably know it better than me. Basically, have we 100% confirmed it's Citadel? I think that's the.
I don't think we're 100% confirmed.
Yeah.
But
so,
okay, we'll just use them as the example.
Yeah. A
sophisticated-ish firm with a lot of capital.
Yeah, and then basically they shorted Bitcoin. They got a lot of UST, and I think you go over this speaks more than me. But basically they drew in the liquidity. And then the problem with a peg is that if you know specifically how the peg is going to be defended, you know exactly how to attack it. And when you sell a lot of UST at the same time, that forces basically the entities that have to come in to defend it. And when they run out of capital to defend it, the way that the UST and Luna cycle works is that Luna is basically the equity that tries to backstop the UST market. And so when a lot of people want out of UST, if they start to fear that the peg's going to break, they start converting that into Luna. And then Luna starts, basically getting supplied. The Luna price starts going down. And while there's still market cap in Luna, there's a chance to reestablish the peg. That's what happened in their prior kind of peg moments. But when total confidence is lost and Luna itself starts collapsing, that's when the game's basically over. I mean, maybe they can salvage it at this tiny little level and do whatever they're going to do with it. But essentially, once Luna itself lost its value, the game was over. And then they can close their Bitcoin short. They might have also shorted Luna itself. And even if this wasn't attacked now, the problem is that if something can be attacked, it will be attacked. And so the more fundamental problem was that demand for UST was rather artificial in the first place. It was based on these artificially high yields that were supported by VC capital input. And so if you looked at the system, the reserves on that were being drawn down rather quickly. And so in a couple months, Anchor would have run out of money and either needs to be topped off or the yields would have had to fall in, which would have decreased the demand for UST. And so even without this attack, you would have had to basically either keep putting capital in to keep it going, or it would have died a slower death until it breaks one day. And instead, we just kind of ripped the bandit off and someone attacked it. But you might be able to describe it in more detail than I just did.
Well, it's interesting because I think what cued a lot of us to just say, like, a few months ago when, they started putting Do Kwon on these shows and trying to sniff around Bitcoiners and do the orange washing thing, affinity scamming, all we had to look at was, all the UST is parked in Anchor Protocol and Anchor Protocol has 20% interest. Like, obviously that's BS and not sustainable. So something rotten is afoot here. And it didn't take too much to find a few blog posts and a few tweets about exactly what's going on. And it's essentially these firms like Jump that are supplying the capital to keep topping up that reserve, and like the Luna Foundation Guard. So this is selling Luna out of their printed token pile, because only less than half of the total market cap was actually circulating. Most of it they just printed and kept for themselves. So they would just sell Luna out of their treasury essentially into the open market to fund this, they're just using printed tokens pumped up by a confidence game to buy that Bitcoin. That's weak hands, right? So the Anchor thing, basically any of these desks that owns a ton of granted or very cheaply acquired Luna, a lot of it is on a vesting schedule of like 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. And so they kind of have their dates of when it is, and, it invests, each month or something after the first year. They're all kind of in the monthly vesting now. So they're just looking at their spreadsheets and they're saying, okay, how much money do we have to commit? And this was going on way, way, way before the collapse. This goes back to like January. How much money do we have to commit to keep the Anchor Ponzi going, to get people to keep on staking their UST on Anchor so that there's no sell pressure on UST, so that we can keep on dumping our Luna tokens on retail and dumb funds that we basically got for free? So that was the game. They were happy to keep spending and topping up the Anchor Protocol and pump this thing as far as possible. We're very lucky that this thing got killed in the cradle. Not really. It was kind of a toddler. It should have died last year. It should have been killed in January. I think it was, frankly, Bitcoiners that actually didn't have their head in the sand and weren't just pumping false narratives that actually helped, display how you attack this thing. Frankly, the Citadel or whoever did us all a great service killing it now instead of when it was 5 or 10 times bigger. Hopefully we learn a lesson. I'm really glad it died, and Bitcoin going down 10K is like well worth it to kill something like this and to show us the playbook to not fall for that crap again.
And the closest analogy is an emerging market central bank, which is how I analyzed it when I started to see people talk about it. Basically, there are a number of people for months now pointing out the risks with it, including Cory, who was super, aggressive going around pointing out the problems with this protocol. And so I looked at all the criticisms. I tried to look at the defenses to the criticisms, and I analyzed it myself. And you can map it out like an emerging market central bank, except that unlike a central bank, they have limited ability to capital controls, and they have no economy to tax to make it anything other than a first in first out type of thing. So when confidence is lost and people start selling the currency, the Luna, they basically sold their Bitcoin as the kind of like how an emerging market central bank would sell its treasuries or its gold to try to defend its peg or defend the value of its currency. And when that runs out, there's really nothing left. Basically, you start to get a death spiral in the currency itself, kind of like what we've seen in Turkey and some of these other, weaker currencies. And it's really no different than that. You don't have to understand the technical details to understand why it failed. I didn't look at the Luna code when I started writing about my concerns for it. It was entirely an economic observation based on the idea that UST demand was artificial due to the high yields, unsustainably high yields, and then analyzing the mechanism very similar to a central bank of how they would respond in the event of lost confidence. And so it wasn't really, there's detailed technical ways to attack it, but at the end of the day, it was an economic problem.
Yeah, I got a couple of things I want to point out because I followed this less closely, but I'm very sympathetic to whenever I saw some dude was pushing altcoins buying 10,000. I was like, that's not going to be good. 10,000 Bitcoin. But first and most importantly, did Mike Novogratz really get a Luna tattoo? Or
it's huge. It's
Yeah.
huge, and it's on his arm. No, it's real.
Yeah, so somebody needs to go stick a microphone in Mike Novogratz's face and be like, dude, what were you thinking? And make that guy look like a fool. Two, if Citadel, which I'm not going to assume that is true, but if it was Citadel or somebody else borrowed 100K worth of Bitcoin to thinking about the market dynamics, to think that they're out of that position, I don't think is the right assumption. When you short 100K of Bitcoin and the price of Bitcoin starts moving down, Bitcoiners are great at buying falling knives. And that when Bitcoin drops, there is a lot of liquidity that forms to reaccumulate Bitcoin. And so trying to understand, was it actually Citadel? And are they actually out of the position? Because on the way down, there's a lot stronger hands accumulating and trying to get out of that position, and to think that they would potentially already be out, I think that would be naive to think, and that we could see an unwind of that position depending on how many Bitcoiners stepped in to reaccumulate between 40 and 30. Because I think that it was just Citadel providing a backstop and not Bitcoiners being diamond hands and heroes. Will be interesting to see. Then the third thing, and I kind of want to get y'all's thoughts on these, is third thing is Coinbase or any effing exchange that is listing these things. We saw what happened to BlockFi for issuing a yield account that on the relative spectrum might have been skirting a few regulations, but deposit here, we'll lend it out, people pay yield, and the SEC looked at that and said, hey, that looks a lot like a security that's not registered. You owe me $150 million. That was a massive SEC settlement. So in this case, if you just look at Coinbase, and it's I don't know if it might have been you, Brady, earlier, but you start scrolling down on the exchange, the number of things that are sold that are just it is penny stocks. There's penny stocks that are unregistered. And to think about, just on the heels of what Coinbase put out last night about, hey, customer deposits might be, tied up in a bankruptcy process, that when an event like this happens with Luna, where it goes down 95% because it was just an abject scam all along, that the people that help facilitate that liquidity, the exchanges, they have real exposure. And it's not limited to Luna, obviously, but thinking about the type of exposure that these are the type of things that catch the regulators' eyes. Obviously, Yellen, as much as I have a distaste and dislike for Janet Yellen for other reasons, kind of talking about this yesterday before Congress, that these type of moves are hey, let's go look at exactly what happened there. And it's not just going to go look at Luna. It's going to be the places that help facilitate the sale of unregistered securities. So just kind of thinking about those, beyond the technicals, those three kind of things are very relevant to, I think, how this ultimately plays out. And there will be skins to take and put up on the wall.
I take it you didn't load up on Universal Pet Income Coin when Coinbase said they were going to list it?
Not yet.
No. Okay.
Still sleeping on that one.
Why is it always pets that mark the top of these bubbles?
Yeah. Right.
What do we have against pets.com and Universal
people
Pet
like
Income?
pets. People like pets.
Yeah, it's true. It is an affinity scam in more ways than one.